Hello, and welcome to the Freedom Challenge online podcast. Here at the Freedom Challenge, we strive to do good by helping enslaved women and children to do more than you ever thought physically possible, and to do it together by connecting women with a heart for a hurting world. We hope you enjoy your time being informed and encouraged with host Tracy Daugherty and our amazing guests. So let's get ready and join Tracy for this week's episode.
Welcome back to the Freedom Challenge online podcast. This is your host and the director of the Freedom Challenge, Tracy Daugherty. The Freedom Challenge is a movement of passionate women who participate in physical challenges that test our limits while raising funds and awareness to disrupt the cycles of oppression and poverty that can lead to human trafficking. Recently, the Freedom Challenge partnered with an organization called the I-5 Freedom Network. This is a nonprofit specialized in disrupting the cycles of human trafficking and modern-day slavery through education, advocacy, and training. Together, we are creating resources to equip our communities. And today, we have the honor to hear from, again, Stacey Enmeier. She is the director of the I-5 Freedom Network, and Whisper James, who is the operations director. We're excited to have a second part of our conversation, and we're going to dive into that partnership, what it looks like, and also just learn together a little bit more about how this looks in the U.S. How does human trafficking show up in our country, under our noses? So welcome back, Stacey. Introduce yourself again, and then Whisper, if you would share a little bit about your life, that would be awesome.
Again, my name is Stacey Enmeier, and I have the honor and the privilege of being the executive director of the I-5 Freedom Network. I have two children. John is 11, Gracelyn is 8, and I have a wonderful husband, Mark, who supports me in all we do. And I live in San Clemente, California, and love the job I have. Whisper is my director of operations, the rock star, and a lived experience expert who I value.
Hi, everybody. I am Whisper James, as I was introduced, and also very, very privileged. I always feel very privileged every single day to get to work at I-5 Freedom Network, which is not only an incredible organization, but it is just part of my heart now. I started in the organization actually as a volunteer, then became a board member, then got more, gave more and more of my time, and now I'm here, director of operations, and it's pretty much 7 days a week. I don't ever stop thinking about about I-5, and so I'm very, very privileged to be able and have a chance to, I like to say, turn my pain to purpose in my work, and that is something I spent years and years and years hoping I would find, and I found it in I-5. So very privileged as well. And I'm super lucky to be working with Stacey. The founder, Brenda Wells, is an incredible person. She doesn't live in the area anymore. And that's when Stacey came on, and immediately Stacey and I became sisters. I'm not sure how we didn't know each other before. Like, that's how it feels like, so I myself, in my personal life, I have 4 children. They're all grown now, and some of them have partners and wives, and it's a wonderful watching your family expand. That was something I wasn't prepared for. Just that joy, and also, of course, a little bit of the heartbreak that the kids are no longer in house. So in house, though, I do have a cat. Her name is Toulouse, and she is now affectionately called to Lucifer, because that is how naughty she is.
Oh, she's naughty. She's hilarious, but she's naughty.
I actually have to have her closed up in the room right now, because otherwise she would be here. Like, hello, excuse me.
Oh, that would have been fun, Whisper.
I would like
that
to
be
in the center of attention.
You know what?
She will knock over things.
Whisper, I can just commiserate a little bit with you. We were talking about it, Stacey and I, on the last conversation we had about being a mom and having all of your adult children lunch. And I said, it sort of feels like you were fired from your favorite job And you love it, but you're like, wait. But it sounds like you're in that season as well as I am. So congratulations. But I hold that to my heart, how that dynamic and how that is and feels and what that brings up in us. Something you just said was taking your pain to purpose. I mean, I just want to, first of all, take that statement and highlight it to the top of our conversation, because really that's why you're here. Stacey just shared in our last time together this term of, can you say it for us? This term that you would say,
lived experience expert.
And so you are an expert that is showing the way to those who would hear from you, for those who would lean in with this topic, what it looks like to turn that pain into purpose. And I'm so honored that you would be here with us on this conversation. So thank you for being willing. And Stacey, thank you for introducing us to Whisper.
Absolutely.
So the first thing I want to ask the both of you is, all of us Freedom Sisters, those who have been a part through the years in the activities, challenges, all kinds of advocacy for women and children worldwide, we want to know, what do we need to be thinking about in our own country, under our own noses, in our communities, hidden in plain sight? It's one thing to know that somewhere out there, there's a woman and child that needs us, and we respond in a way through prayer, through giving, and through personally going. But to begin to recognize and be aware that right here, right where we are things that we can engage in a very real way. So what do we need to know, and what do we need to pay attention to concerning human trafficking in our own communities?
I personally think the first thing is recognizing it happens here, acknowledging that, because so often we're like, oh, well, over there or in that country it happens. But the reality is that America is the number one consumer. So we have a problem here. We have to address us as a country, as a nation, and saying, why are we that number one consumer first and foremost? Because again, it's unfortunate, but it is a supply and demand business. It's awful to put it in that way, but America is demanding it. And so we have to acknowledge that first and say, well, why is that? And then we can go on from there. So once we acknowledge, A, it does happen here. B, we are the consumer. I think it goes on to, okay, how do we then be different? How do we change that model? And I think the other thing we really need to start looking into is that it doesn't look like the movies oftentimes. It doesn't look like someone getting, at least in America, we don't have a ton of kidnappings per se. It's not done in that way. In other parts of the world, yes, absolutely. I don't want to diminish that. But in the United States, I'm more concerned with my son having a cell phone than I am about him being abducted to the white van offering puppies. And I think that we have an opportunity to really learn and grow if we're willing to come to the table and be open to that ideology, because sometimes it's easier. It's like, oh, well, stay away from the white van. They won't get you. And it makes us feel safe, when the reality is oftentimes that's not it.
Yeah, absolutely. My own personal lived experience is from familial trafficking. And that's why this is something that I like to speak to often, is exactly that, of it doesn't come around the way that we expect it to. I was speaking at our a fundraiser a couple months back, and one of the things that I was saying is that we think that we will recognize evil when it shows up. We all think that we will recognize it, and we don't always, because it shows up, sometimes in a prettier form then we are expecting it to show up. And so that is why Stacey has, as Stacey has said, though, that she's more worried for her own son with the cell phone than with, a van showing up and grabbing him while she's in the grocery store. And so I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, this is some big information here. This is just what I just heard you both say, and I want to bring to the top. One, family, right? Family being a part of the suppliers of this horrific consumer supplier product. Human beings are not products, but like, how do we look at that and say, what if we destabilized one of those, right? Like I heard you say, Stacey, what if we destabilized or thought curiously about why are we in the US the number one consumer of illicit, horrific, causing a human being to be a product to be supplied, right? Like even just hitting at one of those or bringing more expansiveness, knowledge, awareness around that could quite likely make a big difference, which is what you both are doing all the time. But it is a compelling thought to say, if the family is the supplier, and what is that looking like? And maybe, just maybe, the movie Taken is not what we need to mostly be thinking about, because I remember in that movie, here are these wealthy American girls who speak English and have many resources. It is not likely, mamas, daddies, everyone else, that is not the scenario we need to be thinking deeply about, right? It's
100%.
Yeah. That girl would be the worst nightmare of those suppliers because she is heavily resourced, right? The world is looking for the vulnerable, the vulnerable that is not even knowing that they're vulnerable. And that's what you said, Stacey, is the most vulnerable in our community is everyone with a cell phone. That
Yeah.
is something to think about.
So I remember once my son got lost at a theme park. And I knew in my head, I'm like, blonde hair, blue eyes, red Converse, black shirt. I had an army of moms
Yeah.
willing to find him.
Yep.
He was found within maybe 2 minutes.
Yep.
Longest 2 minutes of my life.
Uh-huh.
But having that privilege, exactly what you said, Tracy, like in the movie Taken, I guarantee the world would have been looking for them because I, in 2 minutes, had an army of parents and they checked in on me throughout the day, which is crazy. Okay, he's still here. We're good. Are you okay, Mom? And I was like, I'm okay. Thank you. It was awful. Thank you. But I had an army of women and dads, just mom and dads, just willing to go on a search. So coming from a place of privilege, of understanding, I had the knowledge of not to yell help, but to give a description of my child.
Mm-hmm.
But the willingness of an army of parents being a child is missing, we will find them.
Yeah.
Is the ideology that we need to deconstruct also, because if someone go missing and like, hey, they're being trafficked, they will be found. That is the hope that they will be found. But I'm more scared of the unseen, of the shame that gets brought in, of the secrets, of I don't want to tell my mom and dad. It's not that you've gone missing, but it's happening in our own home.
Yeah.
And that to me is a scarier concept than having, because there's no shame in me saying, hey, my son's, I mean, there is shame a little bit, but of saying, hey, my son's missing, please help me.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot more shame of, Mom, I took this picture and I can't get it back.
Yeah. It almost sounds like you're saying, Stacey, that there's this place where young people are going missing, but they're showing up as the representative of themselves. Their bodies are there, but there is a soul piece that has secretly intervened and taken the soul of that child and sometimes their body without even us noticing those markers. So that's really where I want to go, is like, maybe both of you or Whisper, you could inform us of what you see is, just kind of the most concerning vantage point where you sit. Like, what should we mostly be thinking about that's making an individual vulnerable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Stacey will have some input on this too, but the dire scenario of family being part of the problem, it is also part of the solution. And that's the biggest important piece with what's going on in our own backyards, is trying to understand what is going on in our house as well, not just our backyard. And that is, so there's going to be some foundational things that might need to change if there's already a problem there, or there's some things that you can start changing before there's a problem. And one of that is going to be that communication, that love, that support, and for your children, and believing in them and letting them know that they can come to you. That's going to be right there, probably one of the most key strongholds for your family, is making a space where your children or other people that you care about in your family can come to you in a safe space and feel all right about talking to you. Because exactly like Stacey said, there's so much more shame in coming, that the kids are going to feel, or, yeah, and I say kids, but, teenagers all the way up to adults, we need to know that there's somebody that we can turn to and talk to about these things, that we will be received with open arms and no condemnation and no judgment, but open arms. I'm here to help. What can I do? So that's like, so we can, as much as we have that possibility, that very sad story of families being suppliers, we can also have families that can be the solutions.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's both and. It's the structure that was designed and created to hold the human experience in a family, and how that can get warped, distorted, and twisted, but then also could be the most foundational, which is, if everyone had someone they could say, I'm in trouble, I did something I know was wrong, but somehow I found myself there, or I was tricked into this and now I don't know how to get out. Like, how turning that light on changes everything, right? Because if you're in a dark room alone, that's really scary. But if you're in a dark room and you know that someone that loves you is with you, it's a game changer, right?
No, 100%. And I feel like there's also the side of, like with Whisper, it was familial. So you have your biological family, but then you also have a chosen family. And that's where we get to offer up to not our own children and our own people, but when someone comes up and says, hey, I trust you enough to reveal something to you, honor that, believe that, and take it to where it is. Because sometimes you might be the chosen family. You might be the chosen person that they say, hey, I feel safe with you. And allowing people to feel safe, seen, and heard, I think is one of the biggest combatants we can do in human trafficking.
Hmm. I have a question. How do you think, and just maybe lend your perspective, and it might tie into what would define a vulnerable person, a person that would be vulnerable to human trafficking, but why do you think so many of us miss some of the signs of those vulnerabilities, or even someone whose life or hints are showing us a particular thing and we're not seeing it and responding or even able to hold it? Like, can you speak to that? Like, what do you see? Why is that potentially that way?
I'll go first, and then Whisper, I want you to add in because I think you have a really great perspective. I think sometimes it's hard to acknowledge this heavy truth. And I think it's hard for us to say, this can be happening right next door to me and I'd never know, or in my own home. And that's hard. And that I feel like it's sometimes easier to say, oh, it happens elsewhere. And it's almost like a type of self-preservation of like, that would never happen to me. That would never happen to my family. And lo and behold, I mean, I have a survivor. Dad is a lawyer, mom is a doctor, doing well, and took one picture online, and we've got now issues. And it's accepting that maybe we are vulnerable is really hard to say. That anyone is a target is really hard to say. So I think sometimes it's easier, like, oh, that happens elsewhere. That would never happen to me. That's not my family. I have faith. I have a wonderful home. I live comfortably. That would never happen. And it just kind of gets easier to decompartmentalize if it's
Yeah.
someone else, not me. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts, Wisp?
Absolutely. That's 100% a great thing to look out for. And the other thing, that's because you were saying, you were asking, like, what does a vulnerable person look like? How do you define a vulnerable person? And the way that I think, the simplest way that I would say is, it's someone whose needs are not being met in whatever way. So whatever those needs are, if they're not being met, um, they become vulnerable. And the reason why I would say any need, whatever need that might be, is because a lot of times as parents, we might think that, well, I'm feeding them, I'm clothing them, I'm keeping them in school, therefore I'm meeting their needs. But that's not going to always be everything that that kid needs. And our needs can change at the time, but it's so interesting because just yesterday, in our cohort that we're currently running with Self-Design Life, we were speaking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how that is an introduction to what is really the human experience, right? We're trying to meet those needs as we go through life in whatever way that we can. But the introduction that the pyramid has become in our society is a very individualized look. But originally, Maslow was actually influenced by the First Nations belief, and that's where his theory was born. Was in his visiting and his talking to the philosophies of the First Nations up in Canada, and their hierarchy of needs is very community based. And it's in community is where you meet your needs. And so I think that that speaks to both the solution and the concern that we can have. So if you're see a vulnerable person, that's someone who doesn't have community, you know? And so again, it's like the family structure, a community structure is also not only
Yeah.
the problem, but also the solution.
Wow, it's so many cultures present that way, right? Multi-generational, the communities are involved in, you need this, I've got that, all of that. It's so beautiful, and it shows a little bit of an insidious weakness in our culture in the US, right? Everyone needs to appear together instead of holding fears, hurt with others. And when we just think about, you spoke about the First Nations and that community base, but also when you're thinking about animals, right? Like a wolf, they say, okay, that one little wolf is away from the pack and is now vulnerable, stands on its own to predatorial behavior. So similar with us. And also the showing up of social media, internet, all of these things really does do a deeper work to isolate. It's just you and all of this world out there that you really can't see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it in the space of community, like, do you really want the only community your loved one to have is social media? Because there's communities out there, but if that's their whole community, then we are talking something pretty scary and something very vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think that would tee you up, Stacey, to speak a little bit to this idea that you said to me. I don't even know if it was on the last podcast or maybe it was when we were together, that you would define anyone with a device as vulnerable. I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just the hard reality is that social media has a big presence, especially with acceptance and community and having, again, those needs be met. So I'm part of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. I work with our police departments and sheriffs. And one thing that we asked a predator one time, how do you keep getting these kids? Like, you literally, how? And he said, do they have issues at home? He goes, I'll fill any need they need. And it's really, it's hard because sometimes, like Whisper said earlier, if you have a phone, we are now opening the door to anyone across the world. It could be right now, there's a big joke right now, a joke that, oh, touch tongues for 30 seconds. And they'll do boy, girl, 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 doesn't matter. And I'll send you V-Bucks, which are, these video game dollars. And it's all over. And so that actually is happening not even in the US. It's happening on the west coast of Africa. But they're saying they're a girl from Ohio. So you literally, if you have a phone, if you have a tablet that has the internet, you are vulnerable because you're not just opening it to your community around you. You literally are opening it to anyone across the world. And anyone can say, oh, you did this. Now you have to pay me $250 or I'll put it on your social media or your mom's or your dad's. And it's a form of blackmail. And so if you have the $250, you say, okay, just pay to make it go away. But does it actually go away? Or is that sold on the dark web? And is that purchased for? So it's one of those things where working with Homeland Security on this, they're seeing it on the uprise. They're seeing the main form of child exploitation really be online. And it doesn't help with the form of AI coming in. It only makes us more at risk. So the idea of, oh, yeah. So in Spain, there was a village who their children were just dancing out in the field, a normal traditional Spanish dance. And a drone came over and AI made them naked. And then it was sold all over the internet. Like AI is this weird phenomenon that we as a society were ready for, ChatGPT, but we weren't ready for the dark side of it. No one prepared us that this could be weaponized to our children. And so it's important that it's not going to go away, but it's something that then we as parents, and I speak this because I have young children, as grandparents, as neighbors need to be aware of and also be able to work with our children with. Show them the dark side. When you see a picture that's been altered, say, hey, do you see how part of her leg in that Photoshop was shaved off? Do you see how she's missing her hand over there? Oh, that must be AI. Sometimes what you see isn't real. And be able to have that understanding of how to work it. Because if we just turn a blind eye, if we just say, oh, no, that's not it, again, it's easier to preserve. Oh, that would never happen to me. That village in Spain never saw it coming.
Right.
There's no way they could have.
It can be really scary when you think about not just social media, but AI coming in and becoming what it is. Like, how do we fight against it? What do we do? When I first started having kids, I was very, very young and I had no clue what I was doing. Also, I didn't have a blueprint from my own parents, unfortunately, but like, how do I be a parent? And I remember at the time when I was really sort of like seeking, seeking a blueprint for myself, I made the decision that I needed to be more present than protective. Like my focus was going to be, that's the way the priority was going to go. More present rather, over protective. And that is really what, as just human beings, what we can do. Like, how do you fight against AI? You really can't, right? We're just little old us. So instead of focusing on being protective or fighting against something, being present and being like, okay, this is a horrible thing that happened, but I'm here with you. I'm going to sit with you, because that's how trauma that's how trauma, it becomes trauma, is an experience that someone goes through that they don't have the support, or they don't have the people to help them through it.
Wow. Again, Whisper, dropping wisdom, present over protective. Because the truth is, as you've already alluded, that individuals that we would say, oh, that will never happen, in some way are tricky people that are set to be paying attention. They're present to the needs and showing up with a felt need that's false. If we, as moms, dads, sisters, church attenders, community participants, are present with that individual, asking curious questions, being that safe place, how much could we either prevent or help walk through out of those tricky, narrow places? Because I feel like humans in general go, especially in trauma, we go, we're the only ones. There's no one else who's ever experienced this. It's only me. I'm the lone wolf over here by myself while the pack is over there all safe. But it's not true. So being present to those circumstances, aware, checking in on the apparatuses, having the open conversations. Have you heard about this tongue game or whatever it is?
Yeah, no, it's all those weird, awful, awkward conversations that just have to be had.
Definitely
And we
not
actually,
comfortable.
no, and we often are either too busy to slow down, or we think we're outside of that, or it's so awkward and we have our own shame that's undealt with, that we don't even want to have the conversation because it makes us feel exposed. So back to the beginning point, Whisper, you said it may require foundational things in your own home and your own perspective that need to be shifted if you are to be an advocate for the people in your own life and in your own community.
It is really about more of a community effort. And that's why education and really informing communities to be someone's safe place. Be someone, whether it be at church, at school, in the supermarket, that someone sees you and you're their safe place. And imagine a world where people actually felt safe to say the truth and have the awkward, hard conversations. How much of this could be prevented, dealt with, and we could actually eradicate it. Where there wasn't shame and guilt over, I didn't know what I was doing. They told me this was the difference. They lied to me here. And we just said, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm safe.
Or even core identity places where I know, speaking back to what you've both said, that looking for what the need is and meeting it. And a huge vulnerability is not having your identity rooted and then going, okay, you want material things that you feel like will make you be more accepted in society. I'll offer those as the need, but with conditions that's exploiting that vulnerability. Yeah. Here we are. We are a community, Freedom Sisters, all those that are listening, that we care. That's why we're actually even listening to this podcast. If there was only one thing, both of you, it could be separate things, like one thing you would say, do this thing to start out on this journey of being aware and being present over just being protective, what would it be? Hopefully both of you will have something different. So we'll have two things, not just one.
A little bit different from what I was speaking to earlier. And that would be find a community in the advocates, in the guardians as well, because you can't just be the only person that's, starts on this journey or is looking out for it. In your community, find other people that also are on the journey with you, because you're going to need community too. You're going to need support. You're going to need those places to feel safe when the going gets rough. So that would be my one thing I'd say.
Yeah.
We call them 2 a.m. friends at our house. Who's the 2 a.m. friend that you're going to call when you're like, hey, I have to go to the ER. I'm throwing my kid at you. I got to go. And they're like, okay. Or, hey, this happened, 2 a.m. Who's going to pick up the phone call? Who's going to be the one to be like, all right, here we are.
Well, and also before you say your piece, Stacey, that's what you're creating at the I5 Freedom Network, is you have these cohorts, and all of you who are holding the stories of individuals are being a community to one another, and in hearing each other. Oh, that story broke my heart. All of that kind of conversation, so that you are staying healthy and engaged and not becoming traumatized yourself by listening and bearing witness to so much pain.
Yeah, that's actually, before I get into my one thing we can do, that's the one thing I hear from survivors, is that they don't have community. They feel like a fish out of water when they're in the workplace. Oh, what are you doing for Christmas? Are you going to see your parents? And she's like, no, my parents traffic me. Why would I want to be around them? But you can't answer that. You say, oh, no, I'm just going to stay home. Oh, we'll come over to our house. They just feel like a fish out of water. So that community aspect, I will affirm with Whisper, is huge. Being that place, and especially for our survivors, because that's the one thing we found with Self-Designed Life and also the I5, is just being a place of community, and leaning into one another. I think the other thing that we can really do is, I'm going to misquote it, so don't quote me on this, but it's from Chariots of Fire. It's an older movie.
You're going to misquote, so don't quote you on the misquote. Yeah, that's all right. We'll get the gist.
You'll get the gist of it. It's an older movie. It's called Chariots of Fire, and it's about a marathon runner. And he says, I run because it brings God glory, and I feel God's presence. And I want to encourage people to find the social justice aspect, that they feel God's glory and presence, because we all can do something, whether it's leaning in to saying, Stacey, I want to know how we get presentations to our youth here. Okay, let's do that. Or, Tracy, I see a challenge walk that we can do over there. Let's do it. Or I have a domestic violence shelter over here that's calling on my heart, that I feel the Lord leaning in. And I am like, then go where you feel in social justice that brings God glory, and where you feel his presence. And that would be the one thing, being a person of faith, is like, where do you feel the most empowered and whole in the social justice area?
Yeah.
And lean in.
You know what's beautiful about what you just said is that social justice can get a bad rap amongst Christian Jesus followers. But I like to view it as this way. Social justice fits under biblical justice. It was actually God's original idea. When we look at almost all of Scripture, it's rooted in the idea that there are vulnerable populations that God deeply cares about.
Yes.
How they're cared for, seen, and ministered to and brought into fullness of life. So I think it's such a beautiful way to say social justice really just rolls up into that Micah 6.
Yeah.
Where it says, what does the Lord require of you, O human? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So I love that. One last question before we get ready to close. If we could put the number, like say we're out and we have that moment, Stacey, where we pause. We talked about that on our last conversation. We had our gut feeling and we're like, oh, that doesn't seem right. What would all of our friends listening do? Like, would you advise us to put a number in our phone so we're ready to report on something? We're not forgetting and we move on and we didn't know where to go. What would that look like?
You're teeing me up so well. So what I would recommend is that every single person First and foremost, put your non-emergency police information in your phone. Not 911, local first, non-emergency, but unless a minor is involved, then it's immediately 911. Immediately. If it's a minor involved, you call, because the worst case scenario is that it's a welfare check. Okay, so no harm, no foul. But I would rather go to bed at night knowing I was a little bit too present than, oh, no, it's fine. And the other line is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And that one is important for multiple reasons. Sometimes you call and you're like, I don't really know, if I made a difference, or did that call really matter? But the reality is that if there's ever a case that's across states, you are creating verification of a survivor's experience. And she said, okay, so I was trafficked in Carlsbad at this place, and someone else also called into the national line and said, I saw a girl in Carlsbad at this place. You are then validating her story. If a boy is like, oh yeah, I was over here when he approached me first, and you're like, no, I saw this boy being approached. It didn't look right. I just need to make the phone call. Make the phone call. It's not gonna hurt anyone to say, hey, I saw something. I don't think it's correct. I saw a gentleman approach a group of 3 girls and they looked uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Make the call.
That's good. And for those of you who are listening, I have the National Human Trafficking Hotline on my phone, and we'll put the link to that number in there, because I think that's just like a very practical thing to do.
Yeah.
Who are your local sheriffs, and have that number for those reasons. Whoa, such a wealth of knowledge, you two. I'd like to end with this. As I mentioned before, the two of you are a part of a partnership, an ongoing partnership with Freedom Challenge and I-5 Freedom Network over the next couple of years. We've got some wonderful collaborative projects, starting with this one that we will be participating together in. One of those is the two of you being at our Adirondack Challenge in September. So we still have that registration open. If you respond from this podcast, you can put the promo code together and you will save $300 on the registration. We will be raising funds and awareness for projects globally, but also partnering with something on your heart, Stacey and Whisper, which is translating one of your education products into Spanish. So what are you thinking about for that? Because we want a little teaser, because we are going to be a part of that alongside of you.
And I love that, because in my mind, human trafficking is a human issue. And regardless of language, my hope is that people get help. That language is never a reason for someone to say, I really wanted help, but I didn't understand. And so my hope is that we're starting with Spanish. We'd love to translate into more, but self-designed life shouldn't be limited based on language. And my hope and my prayer is that we are able to help more and give more resources while taking away a barrier. Because what can be seen as a hill to us can be seen as a wall to our survivors. And sometimes they don't know how to break through. So if we can take down that hill, which is an easy-ish, it's a lot of work, a lot thing to do, but we can do it. We can do it though. It's a challenge, right? That's what the Freedom Challenge is. Like, we're taking on the challenge, and making it accessible is the first step to really broadening people to being able to have resources.
Which is really back to the community aspect.
Yep.
Right? It's beautiful. So we are really happy and honored to be a part of that with you. The two of you are a gem. I cannot believe our time is up. But thank you for being here with us today. If you want to hear more about this topic and have more practical training, again, our two friends, Stacey and Whisper, will be with us September 17 through 21 at the Adirondack Challenge. We would love for you to be a part of challenging yourself, praying intentionally, or giving generously, because these are all viable, important parts of advocacy in this way. And so until next time, let's do good by helping enslaved women and children do more than you ever thought physically possible, hopefully at their Adirondack Challenge, and do it together. I5 Freedom Network and Freedom Challenge with other women who share a like-minded heart for a hurting world. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Freedom Challenge online podcast. If you liked what you heard, join the fight to set women and children on a pathway to freedom across the globe. We are a proud ministry of Operation Mobilization USA and encourage you to learn more at thefreedomchallenge.com and omusa.org for how you can get involved. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram at the FCUSA, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know what you think. We'll see you next time.